Okay, well, thanks everyone for joining us for our webinar, The Executive's Guide to Building and Leading an Impactful Communications Team. Today we're discussing how executives can better engage with their communications teams and collaborate to ensure that communications KPIs are aligned with overall marketing and company goals. In many organizations, there's a fragmentation of understanding between executive leadership and the communications function. And communications teams may be unaware of marketing and business objectives or be seen only as a cost to the business rather than as strategic partners. It's no surprise that communications teams often become vulnerable to budget and headcount cuts. So we're here to address this important topic, and joining us are two CEOs and a senior communications leader who are going to share their perspectives on collaboration best practices and how to lead a successful corporate communications operation. So it's my pleasure to introduce our speakers today. David Chun, the CEO and founder of Equilar. Lona Therrien, the Senior Director of Global Corporate Communications at Mimecast. And Dan Beltramo, the CEO of Onclusive. And I'm Kelly Byrd, the Director of Product Marketing at Onclusive. And for those of you who don't yet know us, Onclusive, we're the data science company for communications. And our software empowers PR and content teams to measure the business impact of their work across the consumer journey, including reader engagement, brand impact, and yes, sales. So today we're going to review the purpose of communications teams and their contributions, how to build productive relationships between communications leaders and business executives, and communications teams' roles and responsibilities, and how to set communications goals and budgets that are aligned with business objectives and organizational goals. And we're going to end the session with Q&A. So please submit your questions throughout the presentation by using the Zoom Q&A feature, and we'll address them at the end. So I'd just like to open with an important reminder that corporate communications and corporate reputation is your biggest brand asset. And most executives agree that public opinion and corporate reputation are more relevant for business decision-making today than they were in the past. Strategic communications is a major driver of reputation, and it also plays a big role in your customer life cycle, including brand awareness, recognition, and the emotional connection that influences purchase decisions. The confluence of a global pandemic, a global recession, and significant civil unrest has corporate leaders responding directly at a high rate. Companies must navigate the implications of publicly supporting causes and beliefs, but can no longer remain on the sidelines. According to a study by our partner, RepTrack, since January of 2020, the effect of communications on reputation has increased by 3%. Companies face pressure to speak up, and more than half of customers think that brands need to fundamentally transform how they engage. So I want to pose my first question to Dan. Dan, can you tell us about some of the key factors of corporate reputation and how communications teams contribute to company perception?
Yeah, thanks, Kelly. Well, there are obviously a lot of things that go into corporate reputation, and I tend to like the structure that RepTrack applies to it. And they come up with 7 drivers for corporate reputation: your products, your governance, your citizenship, innovation, leadership, workplace, and performance. And you know, anybody can see that those are very important to companies. They vary in importance from company to company, but what never varies is the importance of communicating how a company performs in those various categories. And RepTrack has seen a big surge in the need to communicate about those. And one of the ways that we're encouraging clients to think about their communication strategy is to align against the key drivers of reputation for their company. So if for their company, innovation, performance, and products are the big drivers of reputation, you know, we encourage our clients to think specifically about communications against those drivers of reputation. And also by linking your communication plans to reputation, you're definitely linking to something that matters to the company and matters to the CEO, and that's important for most communications departments.
Yeah, thank you. That's a helpful perspective about, translating back to what we know is most important to the C-suite, in particular the CEO, and also just thinking about, what is your perspective and what's most important to you at your company and within your organization as it relates to corporate reputation. So thank you for that. So let's talk about the power of earned and owned media. So studies show that people trust earned and owned media more than paid advertising. No surprise. According to a Nielsen study of 28,000 respondents in 56 countries, the top 3 most trusted forms of advertising are earned forms of media, and number 4 is owned media. Now, why is this important? Because communications teams own a company's earned and oftentimes owned media. This is the team that holds the keys to building trust and therefore corporate reputation amongst all of your stakeholders, be it customers, employees, investors, policymakers, or society at large. David, I want to pose a question to you. As the CEO of Equilar, how have you seen earned and owned media impact your business's reputation and bottom line? And how does your team find ways to use the data that you provide to stay relevant with reporters?
Yeah, thanks, Kelly. Yeah, when I saw the slide for the first time, right underneath earned, the third bar there, that actually caught my attention. We invest a tremendous amount of resources there. I'll talk more about that in a second. But then I look in the bottom half of the slide, and I don't think we've ever spent a penny. Maybe some of the online ads or some of that, some LinkedIn type stuff. But by and large, I mean, 90 to 95% of our marketing, our communications efforts are around editorial content. And for the benefit of the people on the webinar here, for those who aren't familiar with Equilar, so we track deep data around corporate leadership, and that includes compensation, includes board composition, includes diversity. And we're often cited in top business publications like the Wall Street Journal, the New York Times, CNBC, Economist, and others. And those are stories they like to write about. And as often as when they're putting together these stories, they need data. And so we have a tremendous team that invests quite a bit of time and resources to cultivate those relationships, stay on top of what's going on. Big fans of Onclusive. Our team, they've used built out dashboards, custom dashboards to monitor things. But in particular, the authors function. I mean, they really like to go deep and understand not only the Wall Street Journal, but like which reporters at the Wall Street Journal. So if we're doing a story, for example, on CFOs, who's the CFO Journal reporter? What's he or she written about recently? Because often you got to be very, you got to be, how to describe it? You got to be smart about how you approach it. Like if they just did a story a week ago on a topic that you're pitching, well, you don't want to waste that reporter's time. And so, you need to be able to go in and really be thoughtful in terms of how you approach this, and also be a trusted source. And one of the reasons we invest a lot in this, what we do. There are many companies who provide similar data to ourselves, but as we all know, when that story gets written, there's only going to be one provider that gets chosen for that story. And when you can consistently be cited in the Wall Street Journal, the CNBC, the New York Times, those readers are our clients and future customers. And so there's a tremendous amount of the halo effect of being associated with trusted brands like that. And so this is an area I can't, so much of our success has been tied to that, the editorial content, such as newspaper articles.
Well, I have to say, as a CEO, you clearly have a really deep understanding of the communications function. And I'm wondering, how has that changed both your view of and your investment in that department as a result?
Yeah, no, I mean, it's an area that we always look to continue to raise the bar. We just adopted OKRs at our company. So for those who aren't familiar with it, objectives and key results. And, one of our OKRs from one of our goals from last year was get 100 top tier media mentions. And those are, mentions in the publications that I mentioned earlier. And, every week when we meet, we review and we see what's working. We stay on top of what other reporters are writing about. And this has been an area that we continue to look to invest and continue to build out the team.
Well, thank you for sharing that. That's definitely very encouraging, and it's wonderful to hear your perspective on and a bit of how you collaborate with your communications team at Equilar. So to that point, without executive cooperation and participation in building communication strategies, we all know success can be pretty impossible to achieve. So we want to poll the audience. We're going to have a Zoom poll popping up here in a moment asking how well does your executive team understand how to leverage your public relations team. So please take a moment to answer in that pop-up and we'll review the results in a few moments. In setting the strategy for their companies, executives, of course, play a decisive role in making sure that communications teams are not just a necessary cost center, but that they're empowered and given the resources they need to contribute to corporate decision-making and ultimately to company business objectives. In addition to being the most sought-out company spokespersons and brand advocates, executives make the final decisions on the roles, priorities, key structures, and resources for communications. So Lona, I have a question for you. Like your team at Mimecast, communications teams can be responsible for many different strategies that involve executive spokespersons. How do you help give your executives a strong messaging platform?
Sure. So I'll tell anyone it starts with a good conversation. You need to take the time to sit down with the executive and get to know them, get to know what they're comfortable talking about. And also make sure that they're being true to themselves. They don't need to be your competitor's CEO. They need to be their best selves. So once you start to have those conversations, number one, find out what those comfort topics are. What are the things they feel real comfortable talking about, they're experts at, and then tie that back to what are the strategic initiatives of your organization so that you know that you're hitting on those right topics. Make sure that those are compelling stories that you can then build from. And, you could have as many as 10, really just narrow it down to 3, because each time you go to them, you want to make it really easy for them to tap those topics and stories that you can then build from them. The other thing I would say is that often we expect all our executives to behave the same way or even be comfortable with doing media interviews. Some of them really aren't, and you can find other ways to leverage them, I will argue, in your overall communications program. For instance, you may have a CFO that does not like to talk to the media, not comfortable with it, but maybe you could leverage that same executive to talk to some industry analysts about the health of your organization, the financial health of your organization. So there's different ways to leverage executives in different channels as you think about your more comprehensive corporate communications program.
Yeah, thank you for that. Of course, very important to start and think about what are each person's strengths, where does their knowledge and expertise lie? What are they most comfortable and confident speaking to and about and commenting on? So thank you. That's really helpful thought starters about starting to involve executives as potential spokespersons. So let's take a look at the results of this poll. Oh, interesting. Okay, so how well does your executive team understand how to leverage PR? That was the question. We have 11% of respondents saying very well, 46% saying well, 39% saying poorly, and 5% who said very poorly. So I actually, Lona, one other question for you in response to this. So the majority of people here, almost 50% at 46, voted to say their executive team understands well how to leverage PR, but not necessarily that very well level, maybe not where they completely understand the power of the function, the strategic partnership that the team can provide to them. what would you suggest to those in the audience who have an opportunity to, have their executive team better understand the function?
I think part of establishing credibility with your executive team is really being able to articulate back to them that you understand what the initiatives are for the business and what are the activities and conversations you can have that can bring those objectives to life and move the needle for those objectives. So it's having the conversation, it's bringing in different options and ideas, but really it starts with articulating how your ideas tie back to the strategic initiatives of the business.
Yeah, good point.
If I could add something here, I wish I could remember the name of the book, but one of the, and this may have even been a book that Dan may have recommended to me way back when, but it was basically talking about the value of PR and, earned media and whatnot. But a good example would be, take the Wall Street Journal. Like, do you want to be in the story or do you want to buy the full page ad, right? Anybody can buy the full page ad, right? If you have the money, you can go out and do it. And, the Wall Street Journal would gladly sell that to you for most organizations, right? But getting in the story, you can't buy that. And so I think, helping people understand, like, okay, how do we figure out and get into the content? And it doesn't necessarily have to be the Wall Street Journal. I mean, just figure out, okay, what is it that your organization is, who's your target market? What do they read? And figure out how to be that. Because that earned media, you can't buy that, right? And that's where the reputation, the halo effect comes in.
And just to add on to that, I agree with you, David, to add on to that, really knowing and demonstrating that you understand who the target audience is, and who will be reading the things that you want to help influence and persuade. That's something that Onclusive has helped us with. You get a really good sense of how your coverage is being adopted and read. And what's driving traffic back to your website. So if you can demonstrate that knowledge with that data, that's another way to help influence your executive team to say, this is the power that we can bring back to the table with that earned media.
I think that quote of yours, David, I think might go back to Benioff, the CEO of Salesforce, who is a master of public communications. I think that that comes from there. And then I've also written about just, I think you highlight on something very important with regard to public relations, which is you can't buy it. And in today's world, you can buy every kind of ad, you can buy, virtually every other exposure to your client. And they know that. And that is the singular value of PR that really separates it, is the fact that it comes through a third party, it's been vetted, and it's not purchased. So I think that is an important point.
Yeah, absolutely. And that kind of brings us back to, some of those study results we were citing in the beginning here about how people in general trust forms of earned media and owned content more so than paid advertisements. And in many forms, right, we still know when something is clearly an ad. And David, your commentary on you can't buy, right? You can't buy your way into a Wall Street Journal feature story, for example. I think that also brings another point in terms of how we communicate and how we bring the data about the results of communications work back to executive teams and to present it to them in not just a way that's understandable and that shows the impact on the business, but also in a way that is showing metrics that are actually tying back to the value of this work, right? Not necessarily highlighting advertising value equivalencies or AVEs, because again, this is not necessarily the equivalent, right? This is a much different medium, a much different strategy, and a much different impact on the business. But to Lona's point, when you can show data points like, not only did we get these placements in prominent publications and or strategic influencer blogs and publications, but we also, as a result of that, drove people to come to our website and got those visitors to complete key actions on the website. That's when, of course, we kind of peak up the interest of executive team.
Yeah, I mean, I can give you like a real hard data, good example here. So one of the studies we do every year is the New York Times CEO pay study. So the 200 highest paid CEOs, and you can see without question the website traffic the minute before that story runs, and then after the story runs, and then for a couple days that spike. So there's definitely a very measurable way of looking at that impact.
That is
Yeah, absolutely.
That is another difference with PR versus advertising, is it has a much longer tail. I'm sure people keep coming back to your website for that study. Nobody's coming back for some ad to see some ad that they saw on somewhere.
Yeah, Dan, you bring up a good point. There are times where a story runs, and then other reporters are citing the same statistics from that story. So they're derivative work that comes out of it that which we weren't even anticipating. So yeah, you bring up a good point.
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. I know we've seen it in the data a lot here at Onclusive, to Dan's point, that there could be stories or even pieces of owned content, like even company blog content, that might be published in a certain month, certainly on a particular day in a particular week, but those stories still continue to be amplified across social media and to drive website traffic and actions on company websites, sometimes weeks, months, and you'd be surprised, even years after it was published, right?
Yeah.
Things get often resurfaced, especially through social media and email newsletters, or just passing links around and customer communications. And so, yeah, there definitely can be a much longer tail for some of this earned and owned media than oftentimes for paid advertising. Okay, so now we want to talk a little bit about the structure of communications departments. And Lona, I'm actually eager to start off by asking you about this. How have you seen communications departments be structured differently across various organizations? And when it comes to measuring and reporting on your work back to the various teams internally, how do you typically do that, and how often?
Sure. So I'll take the first one. Corporate communications departments are organized differently in different places. But if you can imagine a single thread that could take you through everything on the left-hand side of this traditional marketing side for communications function, there has to, communications, as we're talking about, must be seen as strategic and not as tactical. So here's an example of the many components that a strategic team interacts with to create this kind of like a web of well orchestrated activities between all these different functions. So if you think about the communications function in its whole, an internal communications message under that communications function that's going to your employees to help get them excited about the company or understand an issue about the company shouldn't be that much different than what you will be talking about externally. I also think there's a lot of great synergy between public relations and social media. Where I currently am, we put those two things together, which I find very powerful. And I think people sometimes even overlook the power of analyst relations as it ties back to the overall communications function. Now, say analyst relations doesn't come under your corporate communications function and it sits in product marketing or product management, that's fine. But that content and those reports about what your industry is doing, they have wonderful nuggets of information that can be brought back into your media program and help across all the efforts that you're doing. And then finally, content. Content still remains king in so many ways. Having the smart content, whether it be long form or short form, that helps drive conversations and broken down into all these different channels. You'll also see in some cases, or certainly is the case in Mimecast, that corporate events is tied into that effort as well. And it kind of puts the wrapper around the whole entirety of what the brand could look like and the stories that you're telling. So highly performing comms team will have integrated plans, and they're not separating out, for instance, the public relations from what might be in human resources or might potential like an internal communications. They know what those conversations are, they know what those topics are, and they can remain consistent. And I think it's truly a vital building block of the brand hands-on process to have this type of really strong integration, and it helps kind of as the foundation of your corporate identity.
No, absolutely. Thank you for that, and kind of giving the overview of where things can sit. I've certainly always been a proponent of social media being closely next to, if not, underneath or within the public relations department. And sometimes I think, as silly as it sounds, even starting the conversation, certainly internally and with executive audiences, it can even be as simple as never just saying PR, but always reminding them that you are working in public relations. This is how the public relates to your company and how you relate to them, how they see you, how they perceive you, how they interpret who you are and what you do, and the value of that.
Yeah, and the one piece that shouldn't be forgotten either is that relationship that you have with sales. So as you're building out those public relation campaigns or thought leadership content that you're putting into the public relations machine to send out to the world, make sure that your sales reps and salespeople understand how to use it and what it means.
Yeah, very good point. And actually with that, I'm wondering, for you in the communications department at Mimecast, when you are reporting on the results of, let's just say, a month's worth of public relations and communications and content work, or a quarter, or maybe around a specific campaign, with an example like that, like, making sure that the sales team also has and is aware of and knows how to best leverage that content and that coverage of your company. How often do you typically, report back in that way? And do you share that across the organization, or does it mostly sit with the communications team as a way to learn?
Oh, absolutely shared across the organization and specifically with our executive team. So we report on how our programs are doing quarterly, and we build out a communications dashboard, and we make sure that we have some visibility. And this is where Onclusive has been a wonderful partner for us to help drive the data points that we need to get visibility into how these things are performing. And then we can see quarter over quarter, you know what, that was an interesting idea, but people didn't really click on it, or they didn't really get it, or that didn't create PR that drove traffic back to our website. Or guess what? This one really did, and we should find a way to either grow that, do it again, build something similar to it. So it's quarterly for us. We do also have, David brought up OKRs. We have those as well. So it comes down, to really being able to demonstrate the value of the programs with data and that dashboard.
Yeah, that's great. That's great.
And just to build on Lona's comments, we actually have a cross-functional team that meets every 2 weeks, to talk about, what we have in the pipeline, what's coming, what we're, achievements over the past 2 weeks. It's a very efficient meeting to just resync up and, understand, okay, what are some changes out in the marketplace that we should take advantage of, and be able to figure out which reporters we should be working with on things. So we take this and also getting input, as Lona pointed out, we get input from the sales team. What are they hearing from clients and prospects? What do people want to read, and be able to get some early trends of what to help reporters with.
That's great to hear, and also that you meet and discuss that so frequently. Thank you for sharing that, David.
That's why they have a target of 100 top tier meetings. That wouldn't happen without that kind of executive attention, I can guarantee you.
Yeah, our goal is 2 a week, have that constant drumbeat going. So.
Yeah, that definitely is a tall order, but sounds like very much an attainable one, and that's very exciting. Dan, I want to ask you a question before we move on from this slide. What have you been able to tell about an organization based on how they structure their communications department?
Yeah, well, we obviously work a lot with a lot of different companies, and there's a lot of different structures for their communications teams. Overall, I would say, those teams tend to be stronger when they include social media, content marketing, and analyst relations. A lot of what you see on this side, it's not the norm, I would say, to see all of these pieces built into the communication function. So when they are, you generally has a little bit more stature. Also, obviously, when the comms team reports into the CEO, like it does over at Equilar, or into a strong CMO who values the function, that can also be very, very good and valuable, because the CMO tends to have a pretty good sized budget, and if he or she believes in the comms team, that's a source of support. And then a more subtle one is that one of the ways that we can tell that it's a strong comms department is when it has its own analytics function. Sometimes the comms department has to rely on marketing or somebody else to do the analytics for them, or to come back with data about what they're doing. And that puts them in a bit of a weaker position, because they're not controlling the story or their own measurement or the lens with which their effectiveness is viewed. So those are all key things about how it's structured that sort of are indicators of its effectiveness and value within an organization.
Yes, thank you. That's a really good point, especially when it comes to, well, both effectiveness and value is, are you in touch with analytics departments and teams, specifically as it relates to marketing and communications analytics, who can support the communications team, and who, you are also communicating with about your goals and objectives, and you have an understanding of how you're going to track against those and what metrics are most important in that regard. And how often, to Lona's point, maybe it's quarterly, maybe it's also as campaigns are launched and brought out into the world, or for ongoing initiatives, maybe it's that quarterly or monthly check-in. But how do you engage with those people if you have those teams in your organization?
Specifically with regard to PR attribution, where if the comms team doesn't have the ability to report on that themselves, a lot of times a marketing group will tend to pilfer the value created there for it and attribute it to marketing programs. And since there is some judgment call, I think it's important to to have the analytics in the comms department when possible. It requires a certain degree of scale, but it is valuable.
Absolutely, yeah. I can say from spending a few years working with customers here at Onclusive, when the communications department and any form of or sort of marketing analytics departments, in the first case, know who each other is, and secondly, certainly collaborate in some way. I mean, that's when you've seen communications teams who not only continue to have credibility within their organization and get that executive attention and input and participation, but in some cases, that helps people to get promoted, get the budget to hire the other person on their team, or get the external resources that you need, etc. So while top executives see themselves at the center of strategic communication, they of course need counsel and support to master the challenges of a 24/7 information flow and the dynamics of real-time opinion building in global settings. And this, of course, is where communications and PR teams come in as important advisors and partners to the C-suite. And no one can navigate the ongoing conversations with the public better. We know this, right? Communications and public relations teams' expertise includes not only messaging and campaigns, but also monitoring public opinion and stakeholder interests, identifying opportunities and managing relationships, which allows them to inform decision-making processes that are critical for business growth and success. So at this point, we're just going to kind of open it up a little bit for a little more discussion between Lona, David, and Dan before we start to take the audience questions. And for those of you who do have questions, if you have not already, please submit them using the Q&A function in Zoom, and we'll review those in a couple minutes. So Lona, I want to pose a question to you first. As a senior communications leader, how do you build, speaking on this a little bit more with, beyond the structure of how the department is organized, how do you build a productive relationship with your CEO and the rest of the C-suite to really get their buy-in?
Yeah, so I think
one of the things we've been able to do, and I keep saying this, but it's really true, is to figure out what are the key initiatives that the business is trying to perform, and then we build our comms programs around those 3 initiatives. So when we go in and we're speaking to them, we've already set the base for the same language about what they care about. What is the communications team going to do that's going to move the needle or change things for the initiatives that the business cares about? So our entire PR program is built around the 3 key objectives that we're looking to achieve for the year. And then it goes into specifics on how we're going to try to achieve that. And by doing that, it also helps you think through a strategy for how you want to process, think about your goals and your objectives, but also how you want to manage your budget. What are the big rocks that you really want to move? If you can look at those big rocks first and build programs around those, it helps establish where you're going to kind of put your money.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. And that's just a helpful framework, right? To remind us. And again, I think we can't be reminded often enough, right? Go back to what are the overall goals for your business? And, if those get funneled down through marketing and then into communications, how do you tie back up through those? And to your point, how do you make sure that the metrics that you're keeping track of and the ways that you're kind of checking, your own work per se, are really speaking back to how you're helping the business to pace towards those goals. And in the case of some communications teams and team members who are unaware of what those goals are, of course, the first place to start is to ask the question, right? What are our overall business goals, especially at this time of year? Usually a great time to ask, for 2021 or for this fiscal year, what are we really focused on? What are we trying to achieve? In many cases, it's kind of what is our CEO's main objective? What is our board looking to hear from us next quarter and in the coming months, so that everybody can help to track toward that. Definitely. David, I'm wondering for you, why is it important for you as a CEO? We clearly can see that you are well involved with your communications team and have a great understanding of what they're working on and how they're prioritizing things. So why is it important for you as a CEO to stay involved in communications decision making, and how do you do that given all of your responsibilities? Do you have any best practices?
Yeah, well, I guess a couple things. Given that the audience that we're trying to reach are the C-suite, corporate leaders, and whatnot. And candidly, I'm a media junkie myself, right? I read the Wall Street Journal, I read the New York Times, I read Barron's, all this stuff. And so I personally am excited about it, right? And so that just comes naturally. But there are several reasons why. One is it's been very successful for us. So I'll take it. I see the time that I put in, seeing the ROI associated with it. But also, it's important from a brand perspective, right? And we get, frankly, more requests than we actually execute on. The reality is there are times, especially around corporate leadership, where there's stories that we frankly don't want to be associated with. And there is going to be a fine line of hey, yes, we want to be continue to build the brand out, but then we just don't want to get in a situation where like, oh my God, all press is good press. I would disagree with that, and so I think you really need to be careful about that. But no, it's just I personally find that exciting. I'll borrow the Wayne Gretzky quote. You want to skate to where the puck is going, not where it is. And I think when you look at the media, that's what they want to be, right? They want to be out there first, reporting on the trends. And myself staying close to that and understanding what's going on, it also has an impact on other business decisions within the organization, on the product roadmap and other things. So thankfully, it's not a big time commitment from my perspective. I mean, like I said, we meet every 2 weeks. It's a 15-20-minute meeting. We send out, we have dashboards, as I mentioned before, that our team puts together. We send those out the night before, so we have a chance to review everything, and then we come in and we quickly discuss things and make decisions, and we move on. So there's a way, once you get the flywheel going, and you have the commitment from the top around this, I really think, and once the C-suite and others see the value of this, they're going to want that meeting, right? They're like, okay, I'm not going to skip it. Let's, I may have to move it, but let's keep that meeting. So I think it's, it's that investment and commitment up front doing it. But I see the ROI without question, and that's why I'm excited to be part of it.
Yeah, well, thank you for that. I really I appreciated you saying, skate to where the puck is going, not to where it is, right? To kind of keep that view and keep that kind of drumbeat on what's happening in your industry, making sure that you understand not just the coverage that you're getting and what's going on with your company and your brand, but also, your competitors or peers, out in the market. What stories are they telling, and to whom and where and how often, and down to maybe what spokespersons are they highlighting, and what are their roles in the organization, and what messaging are they using, what kind of value propositions about their business are they sharing. All of that is helpful information to learn from.
Yeah, I want to also share another interesting conversation I had with somebody the other day, and we were talking about the Wall Street Journal, and I'm still old school. I still read the print edition. I do read obviously the iPad, but I also do read the print. And he was like, why are you're in Silicon Valley? Why are you reading the print edition? I said, well, to be honest with you, there are things that happen in the print edition that you miss online, and in particular, what you miss are the full page ads. And what I mean by that is that when somebody like Verizon or something like that is launching a new initiative, when you see them committing, now you're understanding strategy-wise what others are doing. And so, that's a big reason why I still read the print. And until that continues going, I think there's a lot of things that you do miss in terms of kind of, the strategy of various businesses. So.
Yeah, and thank you for bringing that up, because I think so many of us, especially if we're based in the United States or North America, right, we can be very digital focused in terms of outlets and publications and placements that we're trying to pursue, or stories that we're trying to tell, and the audiences that we want to reach. But I think that we might often forget how often print or even broadcast TV and radio, how often those mediums still are not just helpful, but important in terms of reaching target audiences. And especially, of course, if you're looking at a global scale, in many markets, those mediums are still the leaders for storytelling.
Okay.
Dan, I have a question for you before we start to open it up for Q&A from the audience. What KPIs do executives find most impactful as it relates to communications? And with that, what kind of corresponding metrics do you think are really resonate the most when they're the focus of reports that go back to the C-suite?
Yeah, well, at one level, it's very easy to answer. You got to come up with metrics that the CEO cares about. And, it's not just a matter of the inside baseball statistics that you might be looking at to manage your comms organization. The one that all CEOs care about is revenue. And if you can tie communications to revenue, you're in the catbird seat. That's easier and harder to do depending on certain circumstances and companies, but that's PR attribution. Reputation is another one that all CEOs care about. It's one of the reasons that we've partnered up with RepTrack, because when we talk to communication teams and we ask them what their objectives are, so often reputation and driving reputation is one of the most important ones. So being able to link to that in a quantitative way is very important. And then when I say quantitative, the other kind of metrics that CEOs like are, they want consistent metrics, because as a CEO, you're constantly being bombarded with measurement from all your different functions, and you want to be able to build up this intuitive sense of, is it going up or is it going down? And if the metrics are not consistent, then it's hard to really get a good bead on what's going on. A level below consistency of the metric itself is consistency of calculation. Are those metrics being calculated the same way every time? And there's not people monkeying around, manipulating them below that. And then for bigger organizations, we see this a lot with our large clients, having a set of metrics that works globally or across regions is very important. So, what makes it easier to digest as an executive is a consistent set of metrics. Oftentimes, our clients will use things like our power of voice score. But what is not too helpful is when every agency around the world or every region around the world comes in with their own different report on how things are working. Then it gets very hard as a CEO or any executive to equivalate, what's happening. So those are some of the ways that I think about metrics and gaining trust and investment from the executive suite.
Yeah, thank you for that. And to your point, the more that, as communications and public relations teams can report back to the C-suite, both in terms of, how their work is impacting corporate reputation, as we talked about at the beginning, and also, the impact it's having on the business through that attribution, which can be, to your point, through to revenue, right? If you do get a story published that is, in its digital form, and readers of that story then come to your website and you have e-commerce as a part of your business, it's really easy to see that people then, as a result of reading that article, came to the site, purchased something, and boom, there's your revenue impact, right? But even if you don't have e-commerce, there are still ways that we can see that. And of course, that's a part of what we help to enable here at Onclusive. So good point on that. Thank you. All right, I'm going to start opening up to questions here submitted from the Q&A. And Lona, this first one I think is most appropriate for you. So Tony asks, he says, I just moved from corporate into a large local government agency, and we're really in dire need of reputation management and a complete rebuild of our Marcom department. There is no MAR right now, so that also needs to be built. So if you were thinking about building a smaller Marcom department and team, where would you start, Lona?
In terms of internal folks, I think you really got to start with figuring out what is your strategy going to be? What are your goals? What do you really want to start with? Once you know that, you can influence that with public relations. So getting a really strong PR person that can write. I would say if we're talking about people, if we're talking about teams, it's a little different. But if we're talking about people, I think really having a strong public relations expert that understands the market that you're in, that understands who the influencers are, and that can write is a great place to start. Thinking about when you do this well, what you'll start to see is different parts of the business will come in and say, oh, I want a press release. I want some of what I'm seeing going on out there, right? And that's another validation is when you get different parts of the business coming. But if you stick to your planning, your strategy, and making sure that it ties back to your goals, you won't derail yourself. I don't know if that helps because I don't know if he's looking for people itself, but I think public relations is a really good place to start and making sure that they understand who the influencers are, they can have those conversations. And if the team needs to be small, they should be someone who can really write well. And then I would put social media and content right up next to that.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for that. I think that is a helpful perspective, and hopefully Tony agrees. David, I'm going to pose this next question to you. This is coming from Stan. He says, does it make sense for a company to have separate marketing and communications departments? So I guess, as CEO, how do you think about structuring those differently, marketing and communications?
Yeah, I would integrate them. To me, I don't know how you separate them, to be honest. They're so closely tied. The social media side of things. I mean, there's stuff that the stuff we're doing in the media that blends over into social. So I don't know. That's my 2 cents on it. I'm not sure how others feel about it, but I think that there's such synergies and obviously cross pollination between the two.
I would agree, David. The example that comes to mind is that we had built an industry report that we really anticipated being more top of funnel and thought leadership when we built the content and we're putting it through kind of the corporate communications machine that I call it, starting with, public relations. And we found out the campaigns team was using it, and they were using it to help drive people to landing pages, and it was the highest performing content on our website. And it really made you think, okay, so this is actually more mid-funnel. What else can we do with this content, and why is it being digested the way it is? And what else do the campaigns team need, or what they might have that could work on our side of the house? So making sure that you're integrated and you know what kind of campaigns are going on in marketing makes you a stronger marketing team, having those interconnections.
We've seen a lot of examples like that. H&R Block, one of our clients, won an award for like best PR analytics a couple of years ago. And one of the things that we saw that was sort of a derivative was they were doing all of this message analysis in our platform, and they started to take out keywords and phrases and start to feed that back into their search engine optimization and search engine marketing program. So they kind of created this nice loop from comms into marketing, and we see those. Those are the things that are lost if you don't have the integration. And another way that is a fantastic way to get more bang for the buck and works better when it's integrated, as David said, is amplification of your earned media. So, you get that mention in the Wall Street Journal or in the right trade publication for your organization. It gets read for a few days on that site, and then it kind of fades off. But you can often, if you're integrated with marketing, you can drive people back to that publication and get that third-party credibility, so you can amplify it. You can use it in a variety of sales vehicles and content marketing and so forth. So, the world works when they're not connected, but a lot of stuff just falls down and gets lost and wasted in the process. So, I think it's an important point.
Yes, thank you for that, Dan, as well. We have a question here from Megan. I'll actually take this one. She's asking about Onclusive technology. I'd like to hear more about whether it's possible for Onclusive to reliably track the website traffic from earned media stories back to your company's site. So for Megan and everyone else, to answer that briefly, she mentions, she's used other tools in the past and thought maybe that was the case, but couldn't quite get to that data. So yes, we can, of course. We at Onclusive are the inventors of this, not just the concept, but the technology behind PR attribution, actually being able to track the website traffic driven from readers of your earned media coverage, your digital earned media coverage, as well as your owned media content. So if that content is on your company blog, or maybe there are other hubs online where you might be posting content on behalf of the brand, we can pull in data from your website analytics in order to be able to make that connection. And so there are two main ways we look at that. One is the website traffic, and the second is the website interactions. So when people then get to your site, what actions do they complete? Again, if you have e-commerce, do they make a purchase of some kind? Whether you do or do not, do they fill out a form, maybe to request more information, about your company or your business? Do they click play on a video? Do they download any assets that you have on the website? Do they visit specific pages? If you want to see, do people go, let's say, to a product page or a case studies page or even a careers page if you're actively recruiting? So yes, and for Megan and anyone else who may have other questions, of course, about Onclusive technology that we're not going into today, you can always contact us at info@onclusive.com to send more of those there. So thank you for asking that, Megan. Okay, so our next question is from Grace. I think also, Lona, this is a good one for you to start. Do you have any examples on successfully integrating analyst relations into the communications function?
Definitely. There are a couple of really good ones there. So Where I currently am, analyst relations is part of the corporate communications function. That's part of my remit. And there's opportunities where we have built thought leadership content. In this case, I'll give the State of Email Security report. Thought leadership, we're using a third party to help us survey and pull data on the current state of email security. We wrap up that data, we publish a report, we do a lot of different things with it. Now, you wouldn't think industry analysts that follow the email security world would want to necessarily read our research, but because we're using an outside vendor to do the surveys and build it, it becomes a bit more credible. It's not just us saying it, but they look for that information and they're interested in it. So when customers and prospects are calling in to analysts to learn more about what we do, not only do they see that research and digest it, they end up repeating it and talking about it. Other options where I've seen it work really well is where we work closely, as I was mentioning in the very beginning, with executive platforms and building out and kind of staying true to who the executives are and leveraging them in different ways. And we've been able to have executives talk to our industry analysts about the overall financial health of the company. That's also been very helpful to have that connection, because we use that information when we're pitching on the PR side, but not necessarily know that we could use and rebundle that same information to give to industry analysts. And it functions the same way. So industry analysts are saying, oh, they're in pretty good financial health. And it's almost like you're seeding that information. So when prospects are coming to the industry analysts and asking about companies, they have a little bit more information that you may give them, more than what you might give them on just an inquiry or a briefing that's a little bit more straight up. And again, they're also providing incredible reports and details that can be fed into your PR programs when you're looking to make claims about why things should be a certain way. So I've found it very valuable.
Yeah, thank you for that. Great point about, also making sure to cite the research that those analysts have, already shared publicly, and using that as a way to help to build those relationships as well.
Absolutely.
So unfortunately, I know we have a bunch more questions in the Q&A. We're going to move to key takeaways, but I just want to say a call out to everyone who had open questions. One, you can always contact us again at info@onclusive.com. And secondly, it seems we have a lot of interest in talking a bit more, of course, about the budgeting of communications departments. And so look out for future sessions and content from Onclusive that will address that in more detail. I want to thank you all, Lona, David, and Dan. It was really great to hear about your successes in building and leading impactful communications teams. And of course, we appreciate you sharing your experiences. I want to give each of you just a moment to kind of close with a final thought. David, let's start with you.
Yeah, no, thanks, Kelly. Thanks, Dan, and the Onclusive team for the opportunity. In today's age, we're all data businesses, and I think we're all sitting on analytics and different trends that we're seeing out in the marketplace. And then this long tail opportunity of media organizations out there, there's clearly a way to take what you have and turn that into a strategic asset, and it's well worth the investment to build that out.
Thank you for that. And Dan, to you.
Well, I'd say that, communications is a sustained commitment, to be really successful. It's that ongoing commitment. I think David is a, quintessential example of that, but it plays out everywhere. And then that needs to be tied with a level of accountability, and, which often comes through with appropriate measurement and using that measurement to connect the PR and corporate communications activities to things that matter to the executive suite. So that's the link that analytics provides.
Yes, thank you. And Lona, final thoughts from you?
Sure, I just agree with Dan there. I think that it has to be sustained and fed and watered like any other relationship, but always keep in mind also that your team can become incredibly reactive if they're just reacting to inbound. If you've done your job so well that people get to know you and you've built out rapid response programs, so don't be afraid to take a pause, step back, look at your goals and say, do we need to answer this one? So that you can stay strategic and you're not fragmented and ragged
Yeah.
and reactive and running all over the place. And I think David said it earlier too, was all press, good press. Maybe not. Think about what those big rocks are and what you're really trying to move the needle to do, and take that time to think through what a more proactive approach could be. Although we do want to react to the right things, just we can get caught up in those things for sure.
Well, thank you everyone for your attendance today and for joining us for this important discussion. We really appreciate you being engaged and participating, and please look out for more such conversations from Onclusive. Have a great rest of the day.